Good morning. Happy 4th of July. The prelude this morning is Simple Gifts. Many of you know the Shaker hymn chorus words, but there are several verses, and I'd like to share one with you this morning. Reads, "'Tis a gift to be loved and that love to return. 'Tis the gift to be taught and a richer gift to learn. And when we expect of others what we try to live each day, then we'll all live together and we'll all learn to say, 'tis the gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free. 'Tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, we come round right." This is my last day of playing for the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Church in Stuart, Florida. And the words to Simple Gifts resonated to me. When I came to the TCUU, I felt like I landed in the Valley of Love and Delight. I was well accepted, and I found a community like I had never felt welcome before. So it's been a real gift. I hope I have shared my simple gift of music and love of music for the last year and 3 months. I've learned a lot. I think I've become a better pianist, maybe a better singer, and I've learned how to Zoom. How cool is that? But I hope I've always also shared some of my love of music through the Women's History Month, Black History Month, the holiday music, by sharing history about the pieces themselves and the composers. So I will miss being there in person, but I hope to Zoom in as long as I can. And I will look forward to seeing you all, or many of you, in the sanctuary next week. It's been fun for me. So the prelude is Simple Gifts, and it's arranged by Jean Carter.
Thank you, Bruce. It is a gift to give and to share. Good morning. Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Stuart, Florida. Today is the 4th of July, 2021. My name is Janet Groat, and I'll be your worship associate today. We are happy to have Reverend Mary Katherine Morn in our pulpit today. Reverend Mary Katherine began her tenure as president of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee in 2018. Previous to her denominational service, she served as senior minister to a congregation in Oakton, Virginia. She also helped build up the membership in several communities, including small, medium, and large in Texas, Alabama, Washington, D.C., Georgia, and Virginia. She's been around. Mary Katherine?
Thank you, Janet. I appreciate the welcome, and I asked Janet if I could say a quick hello because I especially wanted to acknowledge Marcy Pitkin, who's here, who we share. We share my brother, John, too, but I wanted to say a special warm welcome to Marcy and to thank Marcy because Marcy was, you didn't mention Louisiana, Janet. And when I was in Louisiana, Marcy and her husband, Steve, were very active in the congregation. Marcy was the president of the congregation, and Steve was the chair of my internship committee when I was becoming a minister. And so their part in my being a minister is so special to me, and it means just the world to me that Marcy is here and that I'm able to be with you all this morning at my brother's church. Thanks so much for the welcome.
Welcome indeed. And we want to also have thanks for Corina Pelloni, our hostess with the mostest. She's really been so instrumental in putting these services together. Of course, Bruce, and I don't see him here, but Chris McGannon has been working, trying to get our PR system going here in the sanctuary so you can hear us next week. I see a ladder up towards the attic. I'm sure he's been roasting up there. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, and backgrounds. Good news, next Sunday, those of us who are vaccinated and wearing masks will be welcomed back into church for a service. Please plan to arrive by 10:45. Ushers will lead you to seating for social distancing. And those of you who can't attend it, it will be streamed. If you have some type of name tag, please wear it, as we will not be wearing our normal name tags. We don't want people digging through the boxes. Little social distance problem. Also, don't forget the brown bag lunch on Tuesday at Stewart Memorial Park. Going to light the candle. My arm's not quite long enough to reach the chalice back there. If ever there was a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. I've edited these words by Dana Worshop. Often people say that they love coming to a place with so many like-minded people. But Do I want to be with a bunch of people who think just like me? I want to be in a beloved community where I don't have to think like everyone else to be loved. I want to be with people who value compassion, justice, love, and truth, though they may have many different thoughts and opinions on all sorts of things. I want to be with independent-minded people of good heart. I want to be with people who have many names and maybe no name for God. I want to be with people who feel their interconnection with all existence. I want to be with people who let church call them into a different way of being. I want to be with people who support, encourage, and even challenge me. I want to be with people who give of themselves, who share their hearts and gifts. I want to be with people just like you. Now, Bruce is going to play and sing hymn number 159. This is my song. Let's recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse, and Bruce will sing the second. We should sing along. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about my current ministry. Normally, when I'm preaching in congregations these days, I'm talking about my ministry now with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, but this is a family visit. And so I was glad for this chance to share during your time for all ages the story of the founding of UUSC. Some of you I know are very familiar with UUSC and our 80-year history, but for those of you who aren't, I am glad to introduce my colleague Laura Randall, who will share the story of our founding and our work today.
Hello. Today I want to tell you a story about how the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, or UUSC, began. It all started over 80 years ago when Unitarians in the United States were watching what was happening in Europe, and they were getting very worried. They were worried because a man named Hitler and the people he was leading, called the Nazis, were becoming very powerful and hurting a lot of people. The Nazis believed some very mean and wrong things. They believed the only people who were any good were people who were just like them. They wanted everyone to be the same as they were. And if you weren't, well, they would kick you out of your house, they would take all of your things, they wouldn't let you work, and eventually, they started killing people who they thought were different from them. Jewish people, gay people, people with disabilities, all of them were targets of the Nazis during this time. It was very scary. What do you think you would do if you saw something like this happening? Would you want to help? Would people in your UU community want to help too? It was the same over 80 years ago. The Unitarians wanted to help people in Europe who were being targeted by the Nazis. So, a Unitarian minister and his wife from Wellesley, Massachusetts, Waitstill and Martha Sharp, went to Europe to see how they could help people there. They found lots of ways to help when they got there, but they had to be creative because the Nazis were always watching, and it would be dangerous if they got caught. The Sharps helped get the paperwork people needed to escape to safer places. Sometimes they would even sneak people past guards wearing disguises. They also helped people, including kids like you, get food and clothing in a time when it was very hard to find both. The Sharps were very brave, but they didn't do this work alone. They worked with people in the Jewish communities in Europe. They worked with the other Unitarians in the United States who sent them money and other supplies so more people could be helped. That is how the Unitarian Service Committee, now called UUSC, got started. Today, UUSC still works around the world to help people who are being treated badly find safety and have their human rights respected. We work with migrant communities who fled their homes in Central America and are seeking asylum in the United States. We work with Rohingya Muslims in Burma who are facing inhumane treatment and displacement by their government. We work with people around the world whose home communities are threatened by climate change, and many more. Both back then and today, UUs come together through the UU Service Committee to work with people who need it most. And we will continue to be there to help in the future, because Unitarian Universalists believe in doing what we can to make the world a better and safer place for everyone. Thank you for the ways you help us do this work. We couldn't do it without everyone joining together. Thank you for listening to this story.
Now, let's do our joys and concerns. I'll move a stone in our symbolic river, which we're going to see soon. The blue silk will mark each joy and sorrow for all whose joys and sorrows are too private to share. Remove this stone, and also for all the people who've had joys and sorrows that have not been on Zoom, that we've not been able to share with.
For the pastoral reading this morning, I want to share words from a very wise colleague, the Reverend Molly Hausch-Gordon. I was tickled to learn that Molly was Janet's minister before she moved to Florida. Lucky Janet. This is from Molly's sermon, How to Survive the End of the World. What I so appreciate about her sermon, my favorite thing really in sermons generally, is her fearlessness about telling the truth, her refusal to turn away from what is hard. I'm always grateful when in religious community, we are able to offer up the good news without turning away from the really, really hard stuff. So with that introduction, I invite you to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Receive the gift and challenge of these words and hold them in the silence that follows. To remain emotionally and spiritually intact in these times, we need to turn and face all that is being destroyed. We need to grieve and lament in the depths of community. We need to sit in the rubble of it and pick up the pebbles and watch them fall through our fingers. And to remain emotionally and spiritually intact in these times, we need to turn our face toward the sun, late in the sky though it may be. We need to attend to the beauty that is still here, the connection that never left, and the new life that springs up even in the midst of death. Because the breakdown and the rebuilding are happening all at the same time. They always do. Breathing in, we reach deep for the courage and strength we need to live truthfully. Breathing out, let us relax our bodies, loosening the grip of fear and hatred so that we may know peace and experience love.
Passing of the offering plate. was never just a practical ritual. It's always been a ritual. Let it be a reminder that after meeting our own obligations, we must keep our capacity to give. The practice of giving helps us bring forth the realms of love. Thank you. The donation is gratefully received.
Good morning again. I'm really glad to be with you all today. It feels very comfortable, and your welcome has been so warm. I appreciate it. I want to thank Bob, especially for welcoming me. It's been a pleasure getting to know a little bit about you from more than just my brother, John. And one thing that is clear is that there's a great deal of affection for Bob and appreciation for his ministry. And it's just wonderful to hear that from members of a congregation. My favorite congregations are the ones that really appreciate their ministers. And you are so fortunate to have Bob's ministry. And I understand to have it again, that's really special. Bob asked if I might talk some about Unitarian Universalist congregations and how we can grow and thrive. And since so much of my ministry was spent working in congregations, striving to be relevant, effective, and vibrant, it's been a journey coming back to this and recognizing how my own thoughts and questions have evolved. I come to the question humbly because while I spent 27 years of my adult life serving in congregations, it's been 7 years since I've been in a congregational ministry position. So I offer you this humbly, knowing how very much has changed. First, I want to say, if the religious community does what Janet's opening words says it might, then Bob's question is well worth our time and attention. I know people whose lives have been saved by Unitarian Universalism. I know of communities that are better because of the UU congregations in them. I could tell you literally 1,000 stories of transformation that has happened in and because of UU congregations. I hope I'm not the only one, and you may think it's a little odd that I'm trying to make a case for this, but I wonder if you're comfortable using the chat, you might say whether you agree that it matters, that what we are doing matters. If you have the energy to type yes, if you agree in the chat, it might give me some energy and reassure me as I keep going. I'll be watching the chat. Okay, somebody, I'm just actually going to wait until somebody, thank you. No, John, you only sent that to me. My brother only sent it to me. You have to tell everyone. Thank you, Tia. I sometimes say I tripped and fell into ministry and really into religious community. Like many, maybe some of you, I rejected religion when I went to college for all the right reasons. Everything I knew about church, which admittedly wasn't much, left me cold. But I was grateful for the little bit of extra cash I was able to make during college as playing the piano for a tiny rural Presbyterian church. My brother John had recently started attending the Unitarian Universalist Church nearby, and when their piano player announced that she was moving away, he told me he was sure that playing for the UUs would be more fun. He was right, of course, and I was just good enough, not nearly as good as Bruce, to carry them through the services with my hymn accompaniment. And they paid a little better than the Presbyterians, but that's not what kept me coming. I should have known something that my big brother recommended would become important to me. That has often been true in my life. But neither of us would have guessed that within almost a year of my first visit, I would be in seminary, not law school, as I had planned, and that today, 39 years later to the month, John and I would be worshiping together like this. Obviously, it didn't take me long to see and experience the gifts of progressive religious community, the potential of religious community to transform us and to transform the world. That first year, in fact, I had the terrible blessing of watching how faith community can hold their young people when a teenager among them dies by suicide. And since then, over and over again, I have experienced in good times and terrible times, the gifts and grace of being in intentional community that is gathered to help us be the best versions of ourselves, to hold one another through the despair and the joy, and to invite us to come together and make the world better, fairer, and more just. Or, in words commonly used, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. It matters, and thank you to everyone who affirmed that in the chat. I'm grateful for the gifts I've received and witnessed in congregations, and also grateful for this faith that supports an international human rights organization that saves lives and supports people on the front lines in their fight for justice as they build a better world in the face of threats that few of us can imagine. It matters. So, now that we are in agreement about that, at least most of us, I think it's also important that we agree that it's not looking so great for religion. You are not the only congregation concerned about how you are going to grow. Though Unitarian Universalism has not lost nearly as high a percentage of our members as most mainline US churches, the decline is unmistakable. The most telling sign is the decrease in the number of children that congregations are reporting. It's not looking good. What I'm saying is obvious, but it still feels like the wrong thing to say. Religion, as we know it, is dying. Which brings to mind a definition of religion I found helpful early on. Religion, and this is from the Reverend Forest Church, religion is a human response to being alive and having to die. Or another way I think about it is as a means by which we make sense of our finite reality, even as we have the capacity to imagine infinite possibility. These days in my current work, I'd say the practical struggle is how to face the terror of the world and still greet the new day with gratitude. Or you may have been thinking about the struggle to find joy when the planet is burning. Speaking of the climate crisis, which we must, Molly Hausch Gordon, in her sermon about how to survive the end of the world, is asking a version of this question. I want to share a little bit more from her sermon. She says, we're halfway serious about the end of the world because now when we say the world is ending, we mean an actual crisis in the existence of life on the earth. We mean the sixth great extinction, which is more rapid and more complete than any in the ancient history of the earth, and which this time might include us. And so, yes, we are serious about surviving the end of the world, but only as serious as we can afford to be while staying emotionally and spiritually intact. The world needs us to stay emotionally and spiritually intact. Our children's children need us to stay emotionally and spiritually intact. And she finishes, I am the mother of 2 babies who will inherit the work we do in this moment. And so I want to tell you, I have no interest in despair and no time for fatalism. How do we live with the knowledge that we are going to die? This has always been a question for our species, and it is now more than ever. Religion and religious community call us out of the inevitable and existential despair that lurks all around us and in us. It is easier to resist despair when we are in community. It's also easier to face the truth when we are in community, which is just as important. Because burying our heads in the sand, ignoring the fires around us, being a bystander to violence and destruction is not the way to be any best version of ourselves, individually or communally. And just as resisting despair is easier in community, answering the overwhelming needs of the world is really only possible if we are doing it together. I'm feeling the need for another deep breath. I don't know about you, but letting myself hold the enormity of the world's needs, it makes me want to make some tea and binge watch Schitt's Creek, which I want to say is a legitimate spiritual practice in moderation. Of course, binge watching something isn't exactly moderate, but I only binge when I really need it. I don't know what your version of binging Schitt's Creek is, but we understandably defend ourselves against the heartbreak and violence and destruction in whatever ways we can, hopefully avoiding self-destructive and addictive behaviors. Our small worlds and our larger world have overwhelming needs. So I actually think remaining emotionally and spiritually intact may be too high a bar. At least it is for me sometimes. I love what the prophetic preacher and writer Howard Thurman said is needed. If you watched last week's sermon from General Assembly, you heard a story about him. And what he said very simply is that we need to come alive. We need to wake up. He said, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Don't ask what the world needs. We probably couldn't handle it. Instead, remember a time when you were deeply engaged in doing something, a time when you felt deeply, fully alive. Was it teaching, playing music, organizing for justice, making art, tending to someone who is sick, nurturing children, working to eradicate racism, organizing for voting rights? Remember what you were doing when you felt deeply and fully alive and do more of that. We can't do everything. And trying to do everything is the sure path to us throwing up our hands and giving up. Finding the things that bring us to life is the secret not only to answering the world's needs, to making a difference, but also the secret to finding our own deep gladness. Make no mistake, coming alive is a radical practice, more and more radical all the time. Capitalism has evolved to be a force that uses every possible tactic to keep us asleep, to keep us addicted, to numb us from feeling anything at all. If this were another sermon, I would want to talk about the ways the corporate world and political empire wants nothing more than our sleepwalking and cynicism. It is only our lack of imagination and engagement that allows power to concede nothing. Our sophisticated resignation and cynicism, a favorite liberal excuse, is the opposite of faithfulness. Coming alive is the only way we have a chance at becoming our best selves. As one writer put it, we should be looking for the places where our deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meets. And live, even though we know that one day we will die. I think this is also an answer for our religious communities, and I've seen it. I'm seeing it even now in congregations that are growing in spite of everything. They do what makes them come alive. They find the work that creates buzz for them, where their gifts and passions contribute to the larger community. I remember moments in my own experience when I would arrive at church for something or other, and the air was electric. There was a buzz. You can feel it when a community has come to life, just as you can see it in a person when they are connecting with the force of life that survives and thrives despite the odds. One of my favorite examples of bumper sticker theology is the quintessentially UU saying, "I believe in life before death." What is Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist for? Why do you bother? I'm guessing that the internal gifts of the community will come easily to mind. The book group, the support you give one another. It's always harder to be clear about how a congregation might serve its community, might serve the world. When congregations do this powerfully and well, people will see it and feel it. And depending on many things, they may grow. But if you are alive with purpose and joy, isn't that what finally matters? Every congregation has its own life cycle. Like everything, this congregation will one day be gone. But friends, that's not the last word. Despite all the signs and the odds against us, despite the knowledge that this too will die someday, I want to tell you, I am all in. I'm all in to investing my time, talent, and treasure in communities that ask me to be my best self, that call us to find ways to make the world more beautiful and more just, that forgive me when I fail, even as they encourage me to do better, and communities that will hold me when I am devastated by grief and will remind me that love doesn't die. I want to thank you this morning for all of that. Gathering with you today reminds me and gives me strength. I hope that you find strength and courage and joy every time you gather. and that you find more and more ways to share it. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to join in our closing hymn, Love Will Guide Us. Thank you so much for leading us in singing, Bruce.
Love will guide us, peace will guide us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from great to giving, love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with inner love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the hard night.
And this is dedicated to Bruce Ruby. As we listen to the blessing of music, may we know this ending as more than a time of goodbye. May the warmth of this community and the memory of our chalice flame sustain our hearts and encourage our minds as we engage the blessings of life's challenges and joys. After the postlude, please put yourself in gallery mode so we can all chat.
Thank you, Janet. The postlude is written by John Philip Sousa, and it's entitled The Liberty Bell.